The main problem. I've spoken, and loads of people have spoken and argued about the characters,
conflicted,
the scripting.
The sea is always right!
The sea is always right!
The pacing and utter lack thereof. We've spoken about the predictability of the plot. We've bemoaned the randomness of the conflict.
I have an honest inquiry for you. From where did you procure the table?
How it seems so utterly predictable and trivial and untethered to any sort of broader Tolkien-esque narrative.
Enough with the quail sauce!
Does he have individual steel toes in his boots? And how does that work?
Give me the meat and give it to me raw.
We've railed at the void of compelling character development, of any character development at all. All of these are valid criticisms of the show, and they have been well covered. But there's something underwriting it all which isn't getting quite as much attention, and which actually lies at the heart of this and many another uncompelling story. What bothers most obviously or superficially is definitely the scripting.
How is it you are here?
how is it you are here?
But more fundamental to me is the near total lack of relationship and relational development. Now, I'm a writer, and I do tend to fall more under the category of what I call story-minded rather than plot-minded. Stories are perhaps the heart of humanity itself. When we engage in story, we're seeking to study powerful ideas, to ask big questions, to consider our relationship to it all, to the world around us and our fellow humans, and to us inside ourselves. So, story at its core is, on a certain scale, always doing the same thing. We might say it's seeking, proposing, inviting, reaching, asking, negotiating. It's negotiating with possibility, with the future, with identity, with empathy. It's doing all these things at once, but there are endless layers or dimensions or flavors to this negotiation. Some stories focus more on big ideas, allegory, the personification of the beliefs or powers that present themselves to us in life. Sci-fi explores things like human consciousness, the effects of technology, the various ways society might be structured. The Homeric classics focused on the gods that hold us in their sway, lust and anger and vengeance, wisdom, drunkenness, truth and love. These stories are by nature more withdrawn, more distant from the characters, more overarching. They study some powerful things, but in doing so, they lose something of the resonant intimacy with characters, something of the organic, gripping flow one experiences with a more modern style. This could be seen, perhaps, as a progression of literary spirit through the millennia, in which the focus of story is constricted ever more narrowly towards the full, nuanced, and isolated complexity of the individual. I've been thinking about this lately, and it seems to be a trend, actually, across many dimensions of human experience, most primarily, perhaps, with regards to religion, philosophy, the role of the individual held in tension with the role of the collective. To hear more of my thoughts on that, check below for a soon-coming video on the evolution of storytelling throughout history. When it comes to the modern day and modern sensibilities, we often find ourselves craving this sort of intimate, intensely personal immersion in a character. We want to experience the story through the lens of their emotions. We want to fear their fears and hope their hopes, to be, as much as possible, one with the character we are reading. This leads to many of the characteristics of modern story. You get a faster pace, rather than the flowery metaphors and imagery of history. The things that challenged us as readers jarred us into this place of direct, conscious, imaginative exercise.
To be or not to be? That is the question.
Nowadays, you get simpler, blunter sentences, this sort of organic absorption in the flow. You're carried forward organically in the moment, and it's only in kind of consciously stepping back and observing everything from a distance that you can really try to get at the author's point, or what might be their point.
Their mother's dead.
They don't belong down here.
Better a quick death
They won't last without their mother.
Right. Give it here.
No!
Put away your blade.
I take orders from your father, not you.
Please, Father.
I'm sorry, Bran.
Lord Stark. There are 5 pups. One for each of the Stark children. The direwolf is a sigil of your house. They were meant to have them.
Modern story is challenging in a different and often a more emotionally moving way. When we feel truly connected to these characters, when we truly resonate with their awareness and their every motive, we are challenged to empathize. We are challenged to transcend the boundary of our individual perspective and to appreciate reality and all its possibilities from another, often very alien, perspective. Story today is an exercise in recognizing our shared humanity, recognizing that perhaps it's the same fundamental heart beating in us all.
You think the Honorable Ned Stark wanted to hear my side? He judged me guilty the moment he set eyes on me. By what right does the wolf judge the lion? By what right?
Help! The Kingslayer!
Jamie. My name's Jamie.
So how's this achieved? Well, obviously the more intimately we resonate with the characters, the more we'll be drawn into the story. This is where you need things like believable scripting, potent motivation, character consistency, and so on. Myself and many others have already spoken of how Amazon fails very, very, very extremely when it comes to this.
There's a tempest in me. It swept me to this island for a reason.
There's something missing, though, in all this criticism, which I think sits at the heart of it. Where are the relationships? Fearing orcs and hating Sauron and wishing peace upon the world is all well and good, but what strikes most deeply at the heart of each human individual? In Galadriel's case, perhaps a solitary sort of bitterness is justifiable, perhaps for a time at least. Hers is the role of a hot-headed avenger, a lone wolf consumed by ideology and bitter, single-minded fury. It's believable, though how believable it is 3,000 years after her brother's death is doubtful. Shouldn't she have moved on? Anyway, even if she hasn't moved on, how are we supposed to care about her? What spark of warmth or love in her life is supposed to catalyze her change? As an island of battle and fury and bloodlust marching through the centuries, she can't possibly grow more relatable or human until, I guess, she first vanquishes her foe and then runs smack into this wall of, wait, now what do I live for? That's why the classic sort of bitter, vengeful warrior story always gives them a softening, the recognition of preciousness in life. Randall Thor, well, first he begins as a very, very relatable village guy, and then it's only much, much later that he gets embittered and hardened, but Randall Thor steps nearly into the abyss before he's brought back by Min's love, and the love of all who've poured into his life. The Hound is humanized by Arya, not because of her determined empathy or softness, but because, in its very diminishing, the Hound recognizes the path that led to his own joyless, lonely life.
And look at me. Look at me! You want to be like me? You come with me. You die here.
So it's not just that Galadriel needs warmth and love to be redeemed. It's that if the audience is to even desire her redemption, she needs to have some redemptive entity to value. And the vanquishing of Sauron and the peace of Middle-earth simply isn't going to cut it. Galadriel hasn't shown herself to care for anyone. She doesn't seem to care for anyone on Middle-earth, so why should we? Why are there no relationships? The only one who's shown desiring closeness with her is Elrond, whom she spurns quite harshly,
Conflicted.
and then so far hasn't seen again until the very, very end.
How is it you are here?
How is it you are here?
The other characters aren't as bad, because they're not so central to the plot thus far, and neither are they defined wholly by their bitter loneliness. So, looking at the non-Galadriel storylines, and ignoring for a moment the scripting itself, I've seen the quite common and, in my opinion, quite valid complaint that nothing is happening. Thus far, the entire arc of the show suffers from a lack of actual events preceding that great eruption. For more thoughts on this, check the description below to see if I finished my Rings of Power summary, but basically, very, very little happened, and anything that did has been catalyzed by outward forces such as falling wizards, tunneling orcs, appearing swords, commanding kings, and so on. It's been terribly predictable, as in, the boy finds a dark sword and it might be starting to corrupt him, and they're warned against going into town for food, and then suddenly there are orcs there, specifically in the tavern, which for some reason, of all buildings, they were terrified to enter. The characters themselves haven't really shown much mettle or initiative or even character, desire, with the possible exception of Elrond, who seems stuck in this sort of soap opera with Durin and Disa and the king. And that's actually one of the more interesting storylines. Why? Not because it makes sense or because it's moving apace and developing the conflict, but because there's actually a quartet of characters engaged in conflict. They clearly care for one another, yet that care is vying for priority alongside other things like politics and secret ore. When Durin and Elrond communicate poorly, or fail to show empathy or trust, it actually matters because it affects other characters we know, and it affects them not in structural, plot-centric ways, but also emotive, warm and fuzzy ways. These characters actually have something to care about, and thus the entire structure of the plot is given life and weight and substance. This is what makes Game of Thrones so powerful. You have all these games of kings and oaths and houses, White Walkers and wildfire, and the God of Many Faces. It's hard to tell exactly who wants good and who wants evil, because most people care first and foremost about themselves and the people they're closest to. It's a rare character who just wants power in a vacuum, just for the sake of wanting power. Those characters are usually more boring, more minor, or simply undeveloped. But everyone has a motivation grown of things they've experienced, people they've lost, people they desire to protect. Which scene do we value more? Arya sneaking around to avoid the White Walkers in the Battle of Winterfell? Or Arya making not-so-veiled threats at Sansa in order to deceive Littlefinger? One scene is action, raw survival, terror. We don't care. We hope she survives, and that's that. That's pretty much all the suspense, all the emotion we invest in what the writers are making us experience in that moment. The other scene is made so much more potent because we care for Sansa and we care for Arya, and both of them are treading dangerous ground. Both of them have danced with darkness. Both of them care for each other, and, well, they represent the Starks, the purest protagonists, if there ever were some. Yet, thrust into the face of growing evil, they're forced to grow, and in growing to acquire power, and in acquiring power, confronted with the question as to how to use it. And then they find they have differing mentalities, differing values, and so on. This is relationship in the context of a larger struggle. It's the heart of what draws an audience to the story. It's the anchor by which we are grounded in the world, the lens by which we simply don't observe but also feel. In Rings of Power, what development have we seen between, for example, Bronwyn and Arondir? What difference in values or desires? In the few scenes they've had together, probably like 10 minutes, 6 minutes total, they've simply been trying to survive and wordlessly agreeing on how to do so. What of Theo, Bronwyn's son? He's a boy of sulking and secrets, with pretty much nothing to recommend him in a remarkably daft strategy for evading capture. Consider the sword the most important character or relationship in his life. Consider it a rather ring-like entity. What development have we seen? How has it changed his personality or motives? It led almost literally nowhere. His connection to it doesn't seem to have changed anything about the final outcome, the final summoning that weird village guy did. And him, well, I won't talk about him, but what of the hobbits, Harfeet? All we've learned since the beginning is they're actually rather terrifyingly savage and cult-like, with a tendency towards the sort of dystopian society one might find in an Ayn Rand novel.
Nobody goes off trail. That's right.
We're going to be left behind.
That's right. Nobody goes off trail. Should any Harfoot fall behind this migration, they likewise will be carried with us in our hearts and in our memories.
In our hearts and in our memories.
That's right. Nobody goes off trail.
Any Harfoot that breaks them is to be decaravan.
The Isles Bright Apple, stuck in the snows of the mountain pass.
We wait for you.
We've learned that Nori is sweet to the point of endangering her family, about whom we don't particularly care because, again, nothing has really happened. What of Halbrand? No friends. One of the more charismatic actors and more charismatically scripted, but this is due to his mystery and his certain careless poise, not to his closeness to anyone we care about. They did try to give him moments of hidden longing, moments of deep buried pain, glimpses. They tried to give the genuine sense that he wants something, that he's been connected to warmth and relationship in the past, and he has the vision or desire to be so connected again. But he's also a deceiver, an actor, a puppeteer of devastating power, weaving strings about all those he comes in contact with. He's clearly set his sights upon some sort of domination. Upon the final reveal, we're not really left with any emotional investment whatsoever in these moments of longing or true emotive value with which they tried to deepen him. We just don't believe them, or if we do, we don't know why we should care or how we should feel about them. Consider the first episode of Game of Thrones, not to mention the 4th or 6th or 10th. How long does it take to care about Arya and her relationship to Jon? How long to feel sorrow and frustration at Jon Snow's conflict with Lady Catelyn and his election to go north? How long to hate Cersei, yet recognize her clear care for her children? How long to appreciate Tyrion's wit and balanced earnest?
You love your children. It's your one redeeming quality, that and your cheekbones.
How long to admire Ned's honorable gravity, to cringe at Robert's drunken boorishness, to tremble at Littlefinger's guile? Consider the first half of the Fellowship of the Ring. How long to view Gandalf fondly, yet with appropriate respect? How long to view the Ring with quick-growing misgiving? How long to connect with any of them, with Sam, Merry, Pippin, Aragorn, even after a few scenes? Why is this? It's not because they're running about evading orcs and shooting arrows and insulting queens in high court. It's because they're doing those things alongside others, to protect others, to preserve something of a life and a fellowship they and we treasure.
I can see the Shire. The Brandywine River. Gandalf's fireworks, the lights, the party tree, a rosy cop dancing. She had ribbons in her hair. If ever I was to marry someone, it would have been her. It would have been her.
That's what's missing from Rings of Power, above all. Relationship, warmth, fellowship, love. The characters feel like so many islands, like hollow puppets or video game avatars, simply dealing with whatever confronts them in an utterly unidimensional and predictable manner. Nothing has collateral consequences or even undesired consequences. Everything they do, especially Galadriel and Bronwyn and Arondir, is motivated by one simple thing: survive, recruit, build tower, find Sauron, insult humans and suggest that they owe everything to you.
It is because of the elves that you were given this island. Surely you can spare a few planks and a rudder. Then if blood be the price of passage, I will pay it. But one way or another, I will depart.
Not only are their motives usually quite singular, but the consequences as well. The state of nothing really changes. Galadriel remains petulant and entitled and embittered. Arondir and Bronwyn remain attracted to one another, but distracted by this evil. Nori remains babysitter to a giant, incoherent bumpkin. At least Elrond's got a bit of variation in his storyline, suspecting Durin one moment, bickering the next, then embracing most fondly before spiraling into another confrontation. Episodes 1 and 2, maybe 3, I was willing to wait, granting them a bit of time to build up momentum and emotional connection.
Sometimes the folly of youth is enough to make an old man weep.
We obviously have a lot of nostalgia and reverence for the original trilogy that was soured somewhat by The Hobbit. We're wary, we're sensitive, we want to honor Tolkien's legacy. Okay. I was prepared to grant it whatever value it might show in and of itself, to just sort of divorce it from the rest of the canon in my mind and see someone experimenting with what's basically an unstructured Silmarillion-esque type note style. At this point, though, we've just moved so frustratingly little in terms of motives, actions, and consequences. It's all starting to blend together into this hazy mash of indifference. What started out as slow-growing impatience turned to frustration, then to anger, then resigned amusement, and now, inexorably,
just suffering.
Indifference. That's the heart of it, really, and maybe that distinguishes me from other Tolkien fans, or story fans, I suppose. I started expecting not much. I waited and was not rewarded, and now I find myself resigned to the indifference which had always sort of been my natural sentiment or my default state in relation to this show. So yeah, that's the main problem to me, and it's actually something shows above all should be able to get right. Films are the ones constrained by time, who have to march from story beat to beat in order to thunder us towards our conclusion. If Rings of Power were a film, its nonsensicality and cringy scripting would at least be hazed over a bit by the sheer relentless marching of a 2.5 hour plot. Now though, now they're hopeless. Thank you for watching. I'm just getting started with this channel and I'd like to see it sustain itself as soon as possible. If you like this sort of content, please consider a like and a subscribe. I've also linked my Patreon and PayPal down below. I'm hoping to stop freelancing, and so I can devote all my time and energy to this. I'd like to branch out into sort of discussion-based podcast-style episodes and try to grow from there. Thank you.